File folder is beige, standard government issue, resting on a sterile table in a secure reading room. The year is 2001. The room is silent. A researcher's hand turns the cover page. The stamps are bold, black, and unambiguous. Top secret. The title is dry, administrative. Justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. This is not a spy novel. This is a declassified document. Index number 202-10002-10004. Released by the Assassination Records Review Board. It is dated March 13th, 1962. And it contains, in precise military language, a plan for the United States government to attack itself. The common history of the Cold War is one of superpower standoffs, of diplomatic pressure and defensive postures. The story told in school books describes a world where war was a last resort, a grim response to direct aggression. This document operates in a different reality. Its premise is not defense, but fabrication. Its goal is not to prevent violence, but to meticulously stage it. The plan is called Operation Northwoods. Its central question, once you have read it, can never be unasked. If the highest levels of military leadership formally approved a plan to commit acts of terrorism against American citizens to start a war, what does that reveal about the true boundaries of state power? What does it say about the stories we are told to justify conflict? The official version of history is a clean narrative. This document is a stain seeping through the page. It proposes a series of what it terms false flag operations, incidents designed to be perceived as Cuban aggression. The language is clinical, detached. It discusses the shoot-down of a civilian airliner, a plane that would actually be a drone, an empty vessel sacrificed for the script. It outlines the destruction of a U.S. ship in Cuban waters, a modern Remember the Maine, explicitly referencing the 1898 incident that sparked a war. It details simulated terrorist attacks in American cities, Washington, D.C., Miami, complete with pre-written casualty lists and public funerals for mock victims. The goal, stated plainly, is to generate the greatest appeal for war in the American public and the world. The horror is not in the suggestion. The horror is in the paperwork. This is not a rant. It is a proposal, a recommendation, with signatures. So we have the document. Its existence is the first fact. The second fact is its content. The proposals are not vague musings. They are tactical blueprints. Each has a code name. Each outlines specific assets, timelines, and desired outcomes. Consider the plan for a civilian airliner. The memo specifies using a CIA-operated plane. Its markings altered. Its flight plan designed to disappear over Cuban airspace. A substitute drone or an empty aircraft would be destroyed in a pre-planned shoot-down. The world would see the wreckage of a passenger plane. The world would hear the fabricated distress calls. The casualty list would be a work of fiction authored by the Pentagon. Another proposal revisits history with a chilling clarity. It suggests orchestrating the destruction of a U.S. Navy ship near Cuban waters. The memo's language is instructive. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. It then explicitly references the USS Maine, the battleship whose mysterious sinking in Havana Harbor in 1898 propelled America into war with Spain. The historical precedent is not a warning. It is a model. The plan extends to American soil. It details simulated terrorist attacks in Washington, D.C. and Miami. It proposes fabricated bombs, staged riots, even mock funerals for non-existent victims to be covered by a compliant press. The goal, repeatedly stated, is to create a convincing picture of Cuban aggression that would provoke indignation and a war of vengeance. This is the machinery of consent, laid bare in 12 pages. The document is signed. This is the third fact, and it changes everything. The signature belongs to General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The memo is addressed to the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. It states that the Joint Chiefs of Staff have met and consider these actions, and I quote, feasible. The recommendation for their implementation is unanimous. This was not a rogue idea from a dark corner of intelligence. This was the formal, collective judgment of the United States' highest military council. It was generated within the Pentagon's top-secret special group, Augmented, the very body overseeing all anti-Castro operations under the umbrella of Operation Mongoose. Northwoods was not an outlier. It was an option on the table, a feasible option. So what stopped it? The record shows Secretary McNamara rejected the proposal. An aide recalls the secretary dismissing it out of hand. President Kennedy, we are told, rejected the concept of staging provocations. This is the official relief valve. The system worked. The good men said no. But examine the aftermath. The rejection was quiet, administrative. There was no public reckoning, no congressional hearing, no purge of the officers who proposed mass murder as a propaganda tool. General Lemnitzer, the man who signed the memo, was not demoted. He was not sidelined. Months after Northwoods was rejected, he was appointed Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. The other Joint Chiefs remained in power, continuing to advocate for a direct invasion of Cuba. The plan was shelved. Its authors were promoted. This administrative dismissal raises more questions than it answers. Did President Kennedy ever see the actual memo, or was he given a sanitized briefing? The historical record is opaque. We know he rejected the general premise. We do not know if he read the clinical specifics about fake funerals and staged shoot-downs. The distance between a rejected memo and an actual crisis is terrifyingly narrow. The Cuban Missile Crisis erupted just 7 months later. In October of 1962, the world stood on the brink of a very real nuclear war. The public justification was genuine: Soviet missiles in Cuba. But the context is Northwoods. The mindset is Northwoods. The same military apparatus that had months earlier drafted plans to fabricate a crisis was now managing a real one. This is not an isolated document. It exists on a spectrum. In 1964, disputed reports of attacks in the Gulf of Tonkin led to a congressional resolution that escalated the Vietnam War. Declassified archives reveal similar false flag proposals throughout modern history, from British World War II plans to staged German attacks to the hundreds of sabotage plots under Operation Mongoose. Northwoods is unique only in its explicit domestic focus. It is the clearest declassified window into a recurring logic, a logic where truth is not a condition to be discovered, but a product to be manufactured. The most unsettling question is not about 1962, it is about everything that followed. If this plan was drafted, approved, and filed away, what does that say about the filing cabinet? We are left with the facts. Operation Northwoods was real. It was a detailed written plan. It was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and presented to the Secretary of Defense as a feasible, recommended course of action. Its purpose was to manufacture public consent for a war the American people did not want and had no reason to fight. The mechanism was terrorism staged by the state against its own citizens. This is not speculation. It is documented history. What we do not know is almost everything else. We do not know if any preparatory steps were taken before the plan was rejected. We cannot know if similar, equally explicit proposals were drafted for other conflicts in other years and remain in a vault somewhere, stamped top secret. Most fundamentally, we cannot measure the shadow. We cannot know how often the core logic of Northwoods, the clinical engineering of a pretext, has been employed in less documented, more deniable ways. The historical record provides only glimpses. The Gulf of Tonkin, the murky justifications for other conflicts. These are not evidence of Northwoods being implemented. They are evidence of a pattern where the line between defending a nation and attacking it becomes a matter of bureaucratic paperwork. Northwoods recontextualizes everything. Consider its own internal reference. Remember the Maine. For over a century, that phrase has been a patriotic rallying cry, a symbol of an external attack that mobilized a nation. The architects of Northwoods saw it differently. To them, the USS Maine was not a tragedy, it was a case study, a template, a proven method for shifting public opinion. Their memo confesses this. It proposes recreating that catalytic event deliberately with foreknowledge and precision. This is the true unsettling legacy of the document. It reveals that the stories which shape history, the incidents which galvanize nations, are not always accidents of fate. They can be blueprints in a filing cabinet. The final weight of Northwoods is not in its shocking proposals. It is in its bureaucratic normalcy, the sterile language, the unanimous approvals, the efficient filing after rejection. The plan was treated as a policy option, a line item to be considered and then stored. The men who drafted it faced no consequences. They continued their careers. The filing cabinet was closed, not destroyed. This is the lingering question. It is not about 1962. It is about the nature of that cabinet and how many other options are filed within it. The safety mechanism against such a plan was the conscience of a few men at the very top, a thin, singular layer of oversight. The document forces a reckoning with a simple, uncomfortable idea. The public narrative of war is not always discovered by leaders. It can be written by them. The audience for that narrative is not an enemy to be defeated. It is you. The final image is not of a conspiracy, but of a memo, a beige folder on a sterile table. It is a window into a room where the unthinkable is not just possible, but plausible, feasible, recommended, and then filed away, leaving only one certainty. It was once considered, and we can never know for sure what else has been.